What if my entire life has been a mistake? This question doesn't scream, it comes in a whisper, usually in the silence. At 3 in the morning, when the world stands still, and the only sound is the rush of blood in your ears. It doesn't come from the mind, which is busy with plans and worries. It rises from somewhere deep inside, from the place where the soul keeps its secrets. And at first you feel it physically. It's not just a thought. It's a coldness in your chest, as sharp as a shard of ice that slowly spreads from the center, making your breath shallow. Then comes a heaviness in your shoulders, as if they are being weighed down by all the roads you didn't take, all the words you didn't say, all the lives you could have lived but didn't. You know this feeling, don't you? Behind closed eyes on your inner screen, a film plays silently, a film of missed opportunities. Here is the face of a person you let go. Here is the fork in the road where you turned the wrong way, listening to reason instead of your heart. Here is the dream you betrayed, calling it childish or impractical. The frames change one after another, and each one is a quiet reproach. It's not a loud accusation, it's a sad statement of fact from the most impartial judge your own memory. This nightly visitor doesn't ask for permission. He simply sits on the edge of your bed and looks at you with a gaze full of the ghosts of who you could have become. And in this deafening silence, his whisper becomes the only reality. And in that moment, as you stand before this inner court, ready to deliver the harshest verdict upon yourself, I want you to stop. Take a breath and hear me. Let me tell you very clearly, you are not going crazy. Your life is not a mistake. And this feeling, this cold nightly visitor, he is not your enemy. On the contrary, this feeling is proof that something incredibly honest and alive lives within you, something that refuses to settle for half measures and compromises, something that still remembers what the original design of your soul was. Such questions do not come to superficial people. They do not trouble those who are content with little, who go with the flow, never looking deeper. This coldness, this pain, it is the privilege of a seeking soul. It is a sign that your consciousness is expanding, that it can no longer fit within the narrow confines of the life you have built for yourself, perhaps out of fear, a sense of duty, or a desire to meet others' expectations. This existential dread you are experiencing is not a sign of failure. It is the call of your soul, which is tired of compromises. It is a sign that you are on the threshold of something much more real. But what if we are looking at this all wrong? What if our cultural code, our upbringing, has taught us to read this signal backward? Ask yourself a paradoxical question. What if this feeling is not a verdict, but an invitation? What if the feeling that you have lost your way actually means that your true inner journey is finally beginning? Imagine a compass. In normal life, its needle points more or less steadily north towards the goals and values dictated by society, career, family, social status. We follow this route and everything seems clear. But suddenly, in the middle of life's journey, the needle goes haywire. It starts spinning wildly, twitching, pointing in all directions at once. Our first instinctive thought is, the compass is broken. We think that we are broken, that we have lost our bearings, that we are defective. But a wise traveler knows, a compass behaves this way for only one reason. Not because it is broken, but because it has come close to an incredibly powerful magnetic field, to what it has been searching for all this time, to its true north. Your panic, your confusion, your feeling that your whole life has been a mistake, this is not a breakdown. It is the frantic spinning of your soul's needle, which has for the first time sensed the proximity of its true essence, its purpose, and the old maps no longer work. That is why you are here, because the old maps no longer work, and the spinning of the compass needle is both frightening and mesmerizing. You feel that you are on the verge of something important, but you have no language to describe it. Therefore, I want to be perfectly clear about what we will do next. This video is not a set of tips. We will not offer you 5 steps to happiness or cheap affirmations to paint over the cracks in your life. That would be a disservice to the depth of your experience. This is a map of the territory you have just stepped onto. This is a key to understanding why your path, which seems so wrong and chaotic to you, is actually governed by a higher hidden logic. Over the next hour, we will journey together from this cold terror to a deep understanding. We will learn to see the pattern in the cracks of your life, and I promise you, by the end of our journey, you will look at your wrong path, at all your so-called mistakes and regrets, and for the first time, you will see it as the only right one. So if you are ready to stop being afraid of this spinning compass and learn to read its language, let's begin. To understand why this crisis feels so painful, we must first become archaeologists. We must carefully, layer by layer, remove everything we take for granted and excavate the foundation upon which our idea of a right life is built. And at the very base, beneath the ruins of our personal hopes and disappointments, we will find the same ancient blueprint. Let's call it the myth of the linear life. This myth is familiar to us. We absorb it with our mother's milk. It is reinforced in school. It is celebrated in culture. It states that life is a ladder that one must climb upward, step by step, without falls or deviations. Good grades, then the right university, then a promising job, marriage by a certain age, buying a home, raising children, and so on, all the way to the top two, a conditional success and a peaceful old age. It is a prescribed route with clear checkpoints. This myth is incredibly seductive. It promises order in the chaos of existence. It provides a clear manual and criteria for self-assessment. If you are climbing, you are doing well. If you have stopped or, God forbid, descended, you are a failure. But there is one fundamental, tragic flaw in this beautiful, orderly scheme. It completely ignores the nature of the one for whom it is intended, the living, breathing, irrational human soul. From childhood, we are taught to draw straight lines, to value geometry and order. But no tree, no river, no galaxy moves in a straight line. A tree does not grow straight up. It bends, reaches for the light. Its roots go deep in search of water, bypassing rocks. A river does not flow along a ruler. It meanders, creates oxbows, follows the landscape, sometimes overflowing and changing its course. Why then have we decided that human life, the most complex and mysterious phenomenon in the universe, should resemble a perfectly straight highway? And this is where suffering is born. We stand in the middle of our winding, unique path, full of detours, falls, and unexpected insights, and judge ourselves by the standards of this non-existent straight line. We look at our life, which is like a living tree, and blame ourselves for it not being like a telephone pole. The crisis of a wasted life is almost always the result of this false comparison. It is the pain of trying to squeeze a living, cyclical, spiraling soul into a dead, mechanistic, linear model. This model is not just a delusion, it is a cage that we mistake for a path. Now that we see that the cage of a linear life is just an illusion, we can make a more accurate diagnosis of the crisis itself. And for this, we will need one very important analogy that will change your entire attitude towards your pain. Imagine that the crisis of a wasted life is a fever of the soul. Remember how we usually treat a fever, a high body temperature. We perceive it as the illness itself. It brings discomfort, weakness, pain. Our first reaction is to bring it down. We reach for an antipyretic to get rid of this unpleasant symptom as quickly as possible and return to a normal state. But any good doctor will tell you that a fever is not the disease. It is a sign of health. It is a sign that your immune system is working. A high temperature is a defense mechanism, a powerful response of the body to the invasion of foreign elements, viruses, or bacteria. The body intentionally raises the temperature to create an unbearable environment for the pathogen and burn it out. A fever is a fire of purification. It is a symptom indicating that a battle for healing is taking place inside. The same thing is happening now with your soul. That agonizing feeling that you have lived life wrong, that existential angst, anxiety, regret, this is your spiritual fever. It is a healthy, albeit painful, response of your psyche to a life that has become toxic or foreign to it. It is a reaction to a virus, the virus of false values, imposed goals, self-betrayal. And what do we do when this fever of the soul begins? We do the same as with a physical one. We try to bring it down. We throw ourselves into new projects, seek distractions, numb the pain with work, alcohol, or superficial relationships. We read books on positive thinking, trying to convince ourselves that everything is fine. But trying to get rid of this feeling with positive thinking or new goals is like bringing down a fever while ignoring the infection. You may get temporary relief, but the disease that caused the fever will not go away. It will just go deeper, only to manifest later with new, even more destructive force. Therefore, our task is not to bring this temperature down. Our task is to thank it for the signal and courageously ask ourselves, what infection is my soul fighting? What foreign element is it trying to burn with this fire? We, however, will look deeper. If we have agreed that the fever is a signal, then it is time to learn how to decipher it. And for this, I will ask you to do something that requires courage. Not for me, for yourself. I want you to stop being a passive spectator for a moment and become an active explorer of your own soul. We are not going to analyze your entire life. That is impossible. We will take just one fragment, one frame from that film of missed opportunities that torments you so much at night. And now please be honest with yourself. Remember that very wrong turn in your life, the decision you regret the most. Maybe it was leaving a promising job or ending a stable relationship. Maybe it was a move that didn't live up to expectations or, on the contrary, refusing to move out of fear. Choose one, the most vivid moment. Let that memory surface. Feel that very sting of regret. And now for the hardest part. Discard all the should-haves and if-onlys. Forget for a moment about the consequences, about what it led to. Go back to the point before everything went wrong, to the very moment of making the decision. And from that point, ask yourself, what was my soul really looking for at that moment? Not your mind, which was calculating risks, not your ego, which wanted approval, but your soul. What deep need for freedom, for love, for peace, for recognition, for the feeling of being alive? Were you trying to satisfy, however clumsily? Maybe by quitting that stable job, you were not seeking irresponsibility, but a breath of air. Maybe by entering into that wrong relationship, you were not looking for drama, but a desperate attempt to feel seen. Perhaps that irrational act was not a mistake, but a clumsy, yet desperate attempt by your soul to assert its right to exist. So I ask you now, at this very moment, to press pause. Seriously, give yourself these few minutes of silence. This is not just watching a video. This is work, your inner work. Ask yourself this question and listen to the very first, quietest answer that comes from deep within. Don't rush, and when you are ready, we will continue. Whatever answer came to you in that silence, whether it was a quiet whisper or a deafening revelation, I ask you to treat it with the utmost respect, because what you heard was not a random thought. It was not an excuse or a rationalization. It was a voice, the voice of that very deep part of you that was desperately trying to be heard at that moment in your past. A voice that you may have ignored then, but which has spoken to you again now. It was to the study of this voice, these mysterious inner impulses, that one man dedicated his life. His name was Carl Gustav Jung, and we must introduce him properly. He was not just an academic theorist or an armchair psychologist. He was an explorer, a pioneer, a cartographer of the soul. And what is most important for our conversation, he did not create his maps from speculative conclusions. He created them because he himself got lost. In the middle of his brilliant career, Jung went through a period of profound personal crisis, which he called his confrontation with the unconscious. He abandoned all external reference points and for several years plunged into the darkness of his inner world to map its landscapes, its inhabitants, and its laws. From this painful but fruitful journey, he brought back one fundamental discovery. Every soul has an innate, relentless drive, a drive to become whole, to become what it is destined to be, in all its unique and unrepeatable fullness. He called this process individuation. Individuation is not a path to perfection or social success. It is the path by which an acorn becomes an oak and a caterpillar becomes a butterfly. It is an internal, organic process of unfolding the potential inherent within us. This is the true north towards which the needle of our inner compass is drawn. And here is the key idea that ties everything together. While the world was obsessed with external achievements, this Swiss doctor dared to suggest that man's greatest adventure takes place within. He argued that every soul has its own unique path, and the most painful crises occur when we ignore its call for too long. We have reached the very heart of our map. We have determined that the crisis is a fever of the soul, and its cause is ignoring the call to individuation. But what is this call? Where does it come from? And what is this mysterious process for which our soul is ready to stage a real revolution, turning our entire established life upside down? To understand this, we need to meet the two most important figures on our inner map, the ego and the self. Our ego is what we are used to thinking of as ourselves. It is our conscious mind, our CEO, the manager of our daily lives. The ego plans, analyzes, makes decisions. Its main task is adaptation to the external world, survival and protection of our personality. The ego is the captain of the ship, standing on the bridge and looking at the waves. But Jung discovered that the ego is not our entire personality. It is only a small, visible part of a huge continent. The center of our entire psyche, both conscious and unconscious, is what he called the self. The self is the totality. It is the inner God, the silent organizer, the highest authority of our soul. If the ego is the captain, then the self is the entire ship, the ocean, and the map of the starry sky by which to navigate. The self is the one who knows the true destination. And the process of individuation is the process by which the ego, the captain, gradually learns to hear and trust the wisdom of the self, the entire navigation system. It is a path to wholeness, not to success. It is not about becoming better, stronger, or richer. It is about becoming yourself, in your entirety. And now let's translate this into the language of a metaphor that will clarify everything. Imagine that at the moment of your birth, your soul was like an acorn. Within this tiny acorn is already contained the complete, perfect design of a mighty oak tree. Not a pine, not a birch, but specifically an oak. This inner design, this innate matrix of your uniqueness is yourself. Your ego is the gardener. Its job is to help this acorn realize its potential. A good gardener studies the nature of the seed. He provides it with the right soil, enough water and light. He protects the sprout from pests. He serves the design inherent in the acorn. He does not try to change it. But what happens in our world? The gardener, our ego, is taught from childhood that the most successful and correct trees are, say, pines. They are evergreen, grow quickly, and their wood is highly valued, and the gardener, wanting to be good, begins to desperately try to grow a pine tree from our acorn. He trims the broad leaves to make them look like needles. He uses stakes to make the trunk grow perfectly straight. He ignores the inner call of the acorn, which wants to spread mighty gnarled branches and sink its roots deep into the earth. And it is here, in this tragic mistake of the gardener, that your crisis is born. The feeling of a wasted life is the silent scream of your inner oak, which is suffocating in a corset tailored to the pattern of a pine tree. Your ego is in a panic, thinking, I am a bad gardener. I can't manage to grow a good pine tree. But in reality, yourself, your inner oak, has finally gathered enough strength to start breaking these stakes and tearing the corset. So understand the main thing. Your crisis is not a failure of your ego. It is a triumph of yourself. It is the rebellion of your true self against the tyranny of false goals. It is a painful but life-giving process in which your inner oak finally asserts its right to be an oak. To see how this inner rebellion unfolds in real life, let's leave theory for a moment and turn to a story. It's not the story of a specific person, but perhaps you will recognize a part of yourself in it. Imagine a woman. Let's call her Sarah. Sarah grew up in a small coastal town. Her childhood smelled of salt and seaweed. The sound of the surf was her lullaby, and the rhythm of the tides was her inner tuning fork. She didn't think about the ocean. She was a part of it. She knew its language without words, the language of changing weather, the language of seagulls' cries, the language of the boundless horizon that promised not a career, but a mystery. Her soul was attuned to this wild, cyclical, immense element. This was her home. But then the voices came, the voices of reason and society. They told her that the ocean was beautiful, but impractical, that the future was in big cities where steel and glass pierced the clouds, that real success is measured not by the depth of your gaze, but by the height of your position. And Sarah, being smart and responsible, believed them. She left. She went to a prestigious university, graduated with honors, and began to build a career in a huge, pulsating metropolis. And she succeeded. She was incredibly good at what she did. She climbed the ladder step by step. Her world now consisted of the right angles of buildings, the clear rhythm of deadlines, and the artificial light of office lamps. By the age of 35, she had an impressive position, an apartment with a panoramic view of the city lights, and all the attributes of the life she had been promised as the right one. She had become that very pine tree that everyone admired. But inside, something began to die. At first, it was a quiet, inexplicable melancholy in the evenings. Then came the feeling that she was an actress playing the role of successful Sarah in someone else's play. She bought expensive things, but they brought no joy. She went to social events, but felt invisible. She felt a phantom pain, the pain for that part of herself that she had amputated so long ago that she had even forgotten about its existence. And then she started dreaming of the ocean. At first, it was just a sound, a distant, barely audible roar of the surf behind the wall of city noise. Then the dreams became more vivid. She could taste salt on her lips. She saw the waves crashing against the rocks, and every crash resonated in her chest. The ocean was calling her, herself, her true nature, which she had ignored for so long, began to break through the concrete of her orderly life. Her crisis peaked on an ordinary Tuesday. She was sitting in an important meeting, presenting a brilliant quarterly report, numbers and graphs flashing across the screen. And suddenly she realized that she couldn't hear her boss's voice, because in her ears was the deafening, all-consuming roar of the ocean. And in that moment, she understood everything. Her life had not been a mistake. The mistake was choosing to live someone else's life. Her crisis was not a breakdown. It was the call of her soul, the call of the ocean, which had finally broken through the dam. The call home. Perhaps Sarah's story resonated with you. Perhaps you too once heard your own unique language of the ocean. It could have been the language of untouched nature, the language of art, the language of silence, the language of healing or service to others. A language that your mind deemed impractical, naive, or unprofitable. And you, like Sarah, listened to the voices of reason and built your life far from its shores in the metropolis of others' expectations. Now you understand what this feeling is. Your feeling that life has been wasted is the grief of your soul for the ocean you left behind. It is nostalgia for your true home. Every sting of regret, every wave of inexplicable melancholy is the echo of a distant surf reaching you through the noise and bustle of your right life. It is yourself, your deep nature, that refuses to be forgotten. Or, to return to our other metaphor, it is the longing of your inner oak for the sky it never reached because it was forced to grow in a cramped greenhouse. You feel your branches hitting the glass ceiling, your roots cramped in the small pot of prescribed social roles. You gave your tree everything that was considered necessary, the best soil of diplomas and achievements, regular watering from salaries and bonuses. But you deprived it of the main thing, the space to be itself, the space to grow crooked, gnarled, asymmetrical, but free. This pain that you carry within you, this heaviness, it is nothing other than the weight of unrealized potential. It is the energy of your inner oak that, finding no way up toward the light, begins to press on you from within. It is the life force of your ocean that, being trapped, turns into a stagnant, swampy lake of longing. So please hear the most important thought I want to convey to you today. This pain is not proof of your failure. It is not a verdict. It is not a sign that you are broken or that it is all over. Quite the opposite. This pain is proof that your true nature is still alive. Dead trees do not feel cramped. Dried up rivers do not long for the sea. A soul that has finally given up does not experience grief. The very fact that you feel this pain means that your inner oak has not died. Your inner river has not dried up. Yourself is still fighting for you. It is still sending you signals. This fever, this fire, it is a sign of life. Your pain is a lighthouse, and it is calling you home. We have established that your pain is not a verdict, but a lighthouse. A lighthouse that is calling you home, to your inner ocean, to your true self. And this knowledge changes absolutely everything. It transforms you from a victim of circumstances into the protagonist of a great story, from a defendant into a detective. And now that you have this new role, I ask you to do something bold. I ask you to return to your own life, but with a completely different tool in your hands. Not with a ruler to measure successes and failures, but with a magnifying glass to search for clues. Look at your life not as a list of achievements and failures, but as a detective story, a great mystery that you have to solve. And the main question of this investigation is, who was I supposed to become? Yourself, your inner sage, has been guiding you all this time. It could not speak to your ego directly because the ego was too busy listening to the noise of the outside world. So it acted as a secret agent, as a partisan. It left you encrypted messages, signs, and clues. Your task now is to become a cryptographer of your soul. What clues or messages has your self been leaving you over the years? Think about recurring dreams, like Sarah's dream of the ocean. What image, feeling, or plot returns to you again and again in the silence of the night? This is not nonsense. This is a direct letter from your unconscious. Remember your strange, useless hobbies. The things you loved as a child before you were told that you can't make a living from that. The things you are drawn to now when no one is watching. Maybe you spend hours studying maps of ancient cities, or read about breeding rare plants, or you are inexplicably drawn to calligraphy. These are not just hobbies. They are echoes of your soul's language. And what about sudden, irrational impulses? The desire to turn onto an unfamiliar street on your way home? The sudden impulse to call someone you haven't spoken to in 10 years? The inexplicable pull towards certain places, books, movies, or pieces of music that move you to tears, even though you don't understand why. All of this is not accidental. These are the breadcrumbs that yourself has been leaving on the path so that you don't get completely lost. Even your biggest mistakes were often just clumsy attempts to follow these clues. Therefore, I invite you to join this great investigation. This space is not just a comments section, it is our shared research department. By sharing your clue, you can help someone else find the key to their own mystery. Share in the comments what language of the ocean you once forgot. What clues has yourself left for you? What recurring dream, what strange passion or inexplicable pull was that whisper that you ignored for so long? Let's become a community of explorers who help each other decipher the maps of our unique, only true paths. Now that you have become a detective of your soul and have started finding clues, a new question arises. What to do with this knowledge? Especially with the dark, painful findings, with the memories of mistakes that cause so much pain. Instinctively, we want to cross them out, forget them, pretend they never happened. But here we come to the most radical and liberating turn in our entire journey, to an idea that can turn your heaviest burden into your greatest treasure. Your so-called mistakes, your wrong turns, your years spent in a fog. These are not things to get rid of. They are your most valuable resource. The ancient alchemists in their secret laboratories sought a way to turn base metals like lead into pure gold. But for the wisest among them, this was not just a chemical process. It was a profound metaphor for spiritual transformation. The transformation of the dark, heavy, suffering part of human nature into the shining gold of consciousness and wholeness. And in order to begin this great work, they needed a raw material. They called it prima materia, the primary, chaotic, unformed matter. It was often symbolized by lead-heavy, dull, poisonous metal. Without this primary matter, without this lead, all alchemical work was impossible. Your wrong years, your suffering, your chaos, this is your lead. This is your precious prima materia. It is the swamp of your confusion, the darkness of your depression, the weight of your regrets. Society teaches us to despise this material, to hide it, to be ashamed of it. But the alchemist of the soul knows it is within it and only within it that the seed of gold is contained. Without this lead, there can be no gold. Without this painful experience, there can be no wisdom. The ego wants a clean, shiny, flawless life. But the soul does not come into this world for sterility. It comes for experience, for the full range of experience, both light and darkness. It knows that character is forged not in comfort, but in the fire of trials. That compassion is born not from eternal joy, but from knowing one's own pain. That wisdom is not the sum of correct answers, but a depth of understanding born from many mistakes. The soul is not interested in comfort, it is interested in depth. And depth is achieved not by avoiding darkness, but by passing through it. Your wrong path was not a mistake. It was a necessary stage of gathering the alchemical material for your great work. If our sufferings and mistakes are the precious lead for our transformation, then what exactly does this lead consist of? What is this heavy, dark matter that we have to work with? Jung gave this phenomenon a name. He called it the shadow. The shadow is not evil in the biblical sense. The shadow is our invisible psychological baggage. It is the trunk in the basement of our soul where, since childhood, we have thrown all those parts of ourselves that we considered unacceptable, bad, or inappropriate. Our anger, our envy, our laziness, our sexuality, our wildness, our vulnerability. But not only that, our inconvenient gold also goes there. Our unclaimed creative power, our suppressed ambition, our unexpressed joy, if they did not meet the expectations of our family or society. We create the shadow to survive, to be loved and accepted. We form a beautiful, socially approved facade, our persona. Our mask and hide everything that does not correspond to it in the darkness. The problem is that what we hide does not disappear. It accumulates energy. It bides its time. And now look at your wrong path through this lens. Very often, our most irrational actions, our most destructive decisions, were nothing more than a rebellion of the shadow. They were unconscious, desperate attempts by our psyche to live out those parts of ourselves that we denied the right to exist. That wrong affair that destroyed your stable life? Perhaps it was your suppressed passion that could no longer sit in a cage. That sudden departure from an ideal job? Perhaps it was the rebellion of your inner artist who was sick of corporate reports. That outburst of anger you regret? Perhaps it was the cry of your personal boundaries that you had allowed to be violated for too long. The shadow always strives for integration. The soul does not tolerate division. And if we do not find a conscious way to give our shadow parts a voice, they erupt clumsily, destructively, chaotically. That is why the way out of the crisis is not an external struggle. It is not changing jobs, partners, or cities, although sometimes that becomes a consequence. The true way out is courageous inner work. It is to stop running from what is in your basement and finally go down there with a lantern. It is to stop fighting your shadow and start talking to it. This requires immense courage. It is much easier to blame others or fate, but the only path to wholeness is to turn and face what you despise in yourself. And instead of asking, "How do I get rid of this?" ask a completely different question. What have you come to teach me? To go down to the basement with a lantern, to face the shadow, to ask it a question? This sounds like powerful but frightening poetry. But how to do it practically? How to start this dialogue if you have practiced only deafening silence towards these parts of yourself for decades? Here I will not offer you a complex system or a step-by-step plan. The great work of the soul does not tolerate a mechanistic approach. Instead, I will offer you something much simpler and at the same time more profound, a new inner attitude, a practice that can be called the art of listening. It requires nothing from you but a pen, paper, and a few minutes of silence. This tool is journaling, but not as we were taught in school. It is not a report of the day's events. It is a sacred space for dialogue. Here is how it works. Choose one feeling that bothers you the most, that very fever of the soul. It could be your chronic melancholy, your sudden anger, your paralyzing apathy. Do not try to analyze it. Instead, give it an image. Imagine it as a living being, as a messenger who has come to you with news. Perhaps your melancholy is a gray, silent figure in a cloak. Perhaps your anger is a clenched ball of fire. Now open your journal, and on one side of the page, write a question addressed directly to this being. Not why do I feel melancholy? But dear melancholy, I see you. Why have you come to me today? What do you want to show me? Not how do I get rid of anger, but anger, I feel your power. What important boundary of mine has someone violated? What are you trying to protect? And then listen. And on the other side of the page, write down everything that comes in response. Do not edit. Do not censor. Do not try to be logical. The answer may come in the form of a single word, in the form of a fragment of a memory, in the form of an image or a metaphor. Your task is simply to be a secretary who impartially records the message. Even if the answer seems like nonsense to you, write it down. The goal of this practice is not to get an immediate and clear answer that will solve all your problems. The goal is in the very act of respectful attention. Every time you sit down for this dialogue, you are building a bridge to your unconscious. You are showing these rejected, shadow parts of yourself that you are ready to listen to them, that they are no longer enemies but allies. Your task is not to find answers, but to learn to ask the right questions of your inner world, to stop being a dictator to your soul and become its attentive listener. In this simple but regular act of listening lies all the magic. This is practical alchemy. Perhaps listening to all this about alchemy, the shadow, and dialogues with your own melancholy, you still feel weak. Perhaps deep down, a thought sounds, "This is all too complicated. I am broken. I don't have the strength for this work." This is a natural feeling. After all your energy is spent on maintaining a facade, on fighting this inner fever. But I am here to tell you something with absolute certainty. You are mistaken in your self-assessment. Radically mistaken. The very fact that you are experiencing this crisis is irrefutable proof of your psychological maturity and strength. Think about it. Weak structures do not experience deep crises. A flimsy shed is not shaken by fundamental doubts. It simply collapses at the first gust of wind. A superficial person does not experience existential dread. He simply finds a new distraction. To survive the inner tectonic shift that you are experiencing, you need an incredibly strong foundation. You need a soul with great depth and potential. What is happening to you is not a crisis of weakness. It is not a pathology. It is a crisis of growth. It is the pain that a seed feels when its hard shell cracks to release a sprout. It is the discomfort a snake feels when shedding its old tight skin. It is the disorientation of a butterfly that is no longer a caterpillar, but does not yet know it has wings. You are not breaking, you are expanding. And this expansion is always painful. Your psyche is healthy enough to raise this fever. Your soul is strong enough to withstand this fire purification. This call to individuation does not come to everyone. It comes to those who are ready, to those who have accumulated enough life experience, enough lead, for the real possibility of smelting gold from it to arise. So the next time you feel broken and lost, remember my words. This crisis is not a punishment for your mistakes. It is an initiation. It is a sign of respect from your own soul, which believes in you more than you believe in yourself. This crisis was not given to you to break you. It was given to you because your soul knows that you are strong enough to endure it and be reborn. We began our journey with a single question, whispered in the silence of the night. What if my entire life has been a mistake? We have gone through the deconstruction of myths, through the metaphors of fever and alchemy. We have descended into the basements of the shadow. And now, having traveled this entire path, we are ready to give the final answer. And the answer is this. The question itself was posed incorrectly. We were judging a work of art by the laws of mathematics. We were trying to evaluate the living, winding path of a soul using the dead ruler of social expectations. And now let's ask a different question. What if your life was not a mistake? What if it was a labyrinth? Not to be confused with a puzzle-like maze, with dead ends and wrong turns, but with an ancient sacred labyrinth which has only one single true, though long and winding, path to the center. What if this labyrinth was specifically built so that you would get lost, so that its endless turns and returns would exhaust your ego, deprive it of its self-confidence and illusion of control? What if every wrong turn, every wall you ran into, was not an obstacle, but part of a brilliant design? A design whose purpose is to make you stop looking for a way out from the outside. And what if, in despair of finding this external exit, exhausted and empty, you at some point just sit down on the ground in the very center of your confusion, and for the first time, start digging down, digging deep within yourself, through the layers of pain, fear, and regret, digging for the treasure that was hidden under the very center of the labyrinth from the very beginning. To yourself, to your true I. The entire path was only to bring you to this point, the point where the outer journey ends and the inner one begins. The wrong path is not a deviation from the route. It is the route. And what now? What awaits you beyond this hour, this understanding? I will not promise you that from tomorrow your life will turn into a calm, cloudless voyage. That would be a lie. The storms of life will not cease to rage. The external world will still make its demands and throw its challenges. Problems will not magically disappear. Something else will disappear. The feeling that you are lost in this storm will disappear. Because now you have something you didn't have before, an inner compass that you are learning to trust. The needle of your soul is no longer spinning in a panic. It has found its true north. And even if the waves toss your ship from side to side, you will know in which direction to move. You will gain the ability to distinguish the voice of yourself from the deafening noise of others' opinions. Along with this will come a deep, calm trust in life. Not a blind faith that everything will be okay, but a wise understanding that everything that happens is necessary. You will begin to see the hidden logic even in the most painful events. Every dead end, every delay, every encounter will be perceived not as an accident or a curse, but as part of your unique curriculum, designed by your own soul. But the most important change will happen when you look back. That film of missed opportunities that tormented you at night will begin to change. The frames will remain the same, but your perspective will change. The editing will become different, and you will begin to see your story not as a chain of regrets, but as a hero's myth, your personal myth, where every failure was a necessary descent into the underworld, every mistake an encounter with a shadow teacher, and every scar a sign of acquired wisdom. We have come to the end of our hour together, but not to the end of the journey. And before we part, I want to thank you. Not for watching, but for your courage. The courage to stay with yourself when it hurts. The courage to look into those corners of the soul from which most people run their entire lives. The courage to question your entire story in order to find a deeper meaning in it. This journey requires immense strength, and you have shown it. Thank you for your trust in me and, more importantly, in yourself. This path, the path of individuation, often feels very lonely. The world around speaks the language of external achievements, while you are learning to speak the language of the soul. It seems as if no one understands the complexity of your inner processes. But today you have learned that you are not alone. You are part of an invisible tribe, the tribe of seekers. Those who intuitively feel that there is something more hidden beneath the surface of life. Those who seek not easy answers, but true depth. Those who are willing to trade the illusion of a simple map for the reality of a mysterious territory. Welcome to the community of explorers. Here in this space, you do not need to pretend. Your pain is understood, your search is respected. Your path, with all its twists and so-called mistakes, is valued. You are home. This journey into the self does not end here. Today we have only mapped out the main landmarks, but the territory itself is boundless, and there are still many unexplored lands on it, dark forests and shining peaks. This channel was created as a resource for such journeys, as a repository of maps, tools, and stories for those who have dared to follow the path of individuation. Therefore, if what we talked about today resonated deeply with your soul, if you felt that this is the beginning of something important, I invite you to subscribe, not to increase a number, but to continue this journey together, so that you always have access to this space where they speak the language of your soul. And if this video has served as a light for you in the darkness, I ask you to give it a like. In our community, this action has a special meaning. Your like is not just a number for an algorithm. It is a beacon. It is a quiet signal to other seekers who are right now wandering in the same fog you once were in. It is your way of telling them, I was here. There is a light here. You are not alone. And in conclusion, I want to leave you with one thought that can become your compass in the darkest of times. Let it be your anchor when the waves of doubt and fear overwhelm you. Remember, your soul knows the way. Trust its wisdom, even when it leads you through darkness.